Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. And today I'm going to be looking at a Valiant comic called Archer and Armstrong. So, first, a little bit about Valiant and when it was about, and then we'll talk about Archer and Armstrong. So, Jim Shooter was fired from Marvel in 1987. There are a number of reasons why. There's no definitive answer. I don't know if we'll ever know the full story, but it boils down to that he didn't get along with others, at least not the right others. He did a number of movies, especially after his term on the Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars, which was a phenomenal success. It made tons of money, so you think everybody would be happy, but unfortunately, according to a lot of creative voices at the time, they were saying that Jim Shooter, after the success of that, felt that he could do no wrong, and that the direction and vision of Marvel should be entirely in his hands. He had already lost some premium talent early when he first came on, with Marv Wolfman and George Perez leaving, but his heavy-handedness as time went on caused other creatives, strong creatives, John Byrne, Frank Miller, to leave Marvel and head over to DC. So not a good thing for the company itself. And it's also possible that he, angered the powers that be that owned Marvel. I don't know the full story there. Were trying to reduce costs because they're trying to sell the Marvel comics, and Jim Shooter was doing certain things that increased costs. Or it could just be that he said they said this is the direction we're going to go, and he may have said, well, that's the wrong direction. I believe we should go this way. So for any of those reasons, perhaps it's even got something to do with the failure of the new universe, or it could be that his salary was so high. If it was, I don't know. That removing it made the package of selling Marvel that much more appealing to somebody. Regardless, 1987, Jim Shooter is no longer with Marvel, but that doesn't stop him from being interested in comic books. And in fact, he gathers together a group of investors, and they put a bid on Marvel, who is now up for sale. Unfortunately, their bid came in second. Ron Perlman, as discussed in a book called Comic Wars, which I've shown before, and I will recommend again, ended up owning Marvel, and that's a whole another story. What does Jim Shooter do? Well, one of the partners is a guy by the name of Steve Mazursky, and he's still interested in doing a comic book. So, again, with the investors, they gather together. They launch what is known as Voyager Communications and the Valiant line. And the first books to be coming out of the Valiant line were Steve Mazursky had ties with people from Nintendo and people from the World Wrestling Federation. Okay. So they decided to make comic books based on those two properties, Nintendo with Super Mario Brothers and with the World Wrestling Federation. These books sold dismally. Nobody was buying these books. And it's a funny thing now because that first issue of Nintendo with Super Mario is perhaps the most expensive Valiant book from this period of time, selling a couple of $100 just for that one issue alone. But at the time, it did not sell well, so they said, okay, what is Jim Shooter's idea about this unified comic universe? Jim Shooter had a chance, once again, to create a universe. Looking around, shopping around for existing characters, noticed that Gold Key had a few that were not being used. Magnus Robot Hunter, Solar, the Man of the Atom, and Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. So they bought the rights to those characters. And the first Valiant book that was part of this particular universe was Magnus the Robot Hunter. So that went on for roughly a year or so. And then there was the grand concept that Jim Shooter had of a project called Unity. And this was going to bring in all the characters that were part of this Valiant universe into one grand event story, and at the same time introduce a number of new characters that would spin off into their own books. Unity sold very well. And this was, again, at the beginning of the 90s. This was in 1991 when there was that boom in the comic book market where a bunch of speculators were coming in looking for brand new companies to get in on the ground floor to get first issues of books. Having seen, great sales with Superman and Batman from the Golden Age, mind you, but they went and they wanted to buy some of these new books. This was also the time of Image, and this is the time of Marvel and DC's gimmick covers. So Unity sold really well. The first issues of the Valiant universe, just pre-Unity, they had a much lower print run, and so they became in demand. Wizard magazine favored Valiant for whatever reason and started to promote Valiant as well, and the books became very hot. And for a while there, the first issues from that first group in 1991 were worth a considerable amount of money. That hasn't translated to now. I still think that there are some books like the Harbinger issue #1 and Magnus and some of these other ones, a marginal bump in cost, but nothing like the Nintendo, which is like a couple of $100. So Unity was there, and they released it, and one of the characters that came out of Unity was Archer and Armstrong. And it was originally written by Jim Shooter and Bob Layton and illustrated by Barry Windsor Smith. But starting with issue #1, Barry Windsor Smith was considered a co-plotter and scripter, and then it was entirely Barry Windsor Smith from issues #3 through 12. I won't go into the demise of Valiant or the fact that Jim Shooter was released from Valiant in 1992. So let's move on to Archer and Armstrong. And this is their first appearance in issue #0. It used to be a nicer copy, but I didn't take care of it well, and it bent in a box because it slid down. But nonetheless, it's not an expensive book, so it could be replaced relatively easy. Archer and Armstrong. So what's the story about? The story is about Archer is Obadiah Archer. He's this young kid who's got wonderful hand-eye coordination. Is it a mutant ability type of thing, or is it just that he's that good with hand-eye coordination? And he has very religious parents. And so he, believes, I had the power of God in me. And look at this, I have managed to do all these things because he has spoken through me. So he was very religious, very devoted to his parents. Unfortunately, his parents were they were slime. They abducted people, primarily children, and they were child molesters. And one day Archer discovers this, and he's only a young kid. He's about 10 or 11 at the time when he discovers this. And so his dad clunes him in the head to knock him out. They bind him in ropes, throw him in the house, and then burn the house down, hopefully burning him to death. But he escapes, and then he discovers that they have plans to come back in the following morning when he's taken to the hospital from smoke inhalation, to finish him off. So he runs away, eventually finds a temple and decides that he's got to learn to protect himself from his parents because they will be coming after him. And as time goes on and he becomes more proficient in weapons and skills, his mindset changes a little bit. Rather than just seeking protection for himself, he wants justice and vengeance for what his parents did to him. So the idea is he's going to return back home, and he's going to see that justice is done. So when he does, and I know I'm explaining a lot, but this is the premise of the story. So Archer does return home, and much to his chagrin, his parents were arrested about 2 weeks after he left and have been in prison ever since. So now he doesn't have a purpose in life. Still got a lot of rage and anger, but doesn't have a purpose. And this is where we run into Armstrong, whose name is Aram, and he's one of 3 brothers, and they're immortal. They've been around for 3,000 years. And he's sort of taking a sabbatical from being heroic or doing all of these things and just enjoying life casually. And he runs into Archer, who actually gives him Archer gives Aram his last $5, and this starts a friendship between the two of them. A weird little friendship it starts, but it's really becomes a buddy comic book. about these two very different people and how they learn from one another and how they interact with one another. And that's what makes it good. It's not about superheroes. I mean, Armstrong is being pursued by a group called the Sect, who believe that he's the reincarnation of Satan. So that's a continual theme throughout it. But it's the book itself is not exactly tongue-in-cheek, but it is handled with a light touch. There's enough humor in there and enough action and enough events happening. But it's the interaction between the two, and they turn out to be a really good duo of Archer and Armstrong. It's a very fun, entertaining read. So this is the first, where they first appear in issue number 0. And then they were part of the whole Unity thing. This is a cover that was illustrated by Frank Miller. One of the things that Jim Shooter did was get a number of top talent to come over and work at Valiant. So we got a Frank Miller cover for issue number 1 of Archer and Armstrong. And we got Walt Simonson doing issue number 2 of Archer and Armstrong. And then Barry Windsor Smith, as I say, he takes over both the writing and art as of issue number 3. So overall, what can I say about... so as far as reading is concerned, yeah, the first 0 through 12 are a definite read. Again, it's not really superhero based. There are some superheroic elements about it, but it's really the story of the two characters and their relationship with one another and how it develops over this time. And it's got great... I mean, I like Barry Windsor Smith artwork. I know some people don't, but I do. I find it very interesting, very delicate, very intricate. It's a good... I like his artwork. So having him do all of these issues up until issue number 12, and having him write it and being understanding these characters and giving them a life, I really enjoyed those first issues 0 through 13. So that is definitely a recommended read. This is just a fun cover. Who doesn't like a dinosaur on a cover? So again, Barry Windsor Smith doing that. I think it's a great cover. Issue number 8 was a flip book with Eternal Warrior number 8 as well. Eternal Warrior, Gilad, is one of Aram's brothers. The other one is Ivar, who becomes the Time Walker. This is an interesting... Let's see, this goes on. Yeah, this side. Okay. See? Okay. This was an interesting tale. This is, it goes a little bit to the Three Musketeers, and perhaps this is the true story of the inspiration behind Alexandre Dumas's book, The Three Musketeers. It was a fun read. I enjoyed reading both sides of it. I do like the Eternal Warrior as well. Actually, I like all three brothers. So, and this is the final issue by Barry Windsor Smith. Again, you can see here's a joke, right? I mean, bee on his head, I'm going to, whatever. But it's the final issue, issue number 12 by Barry Windsor Smith. And then following Barry Windsor Smith, we got Mike Barron is primarily the writer, and they settle on Mike Vosberg as the artist later on. I mean, it goes through a number of different artists until it gets there, and that's from issues 13 through 25. And then the 26th issue, the final issue, is part of something called the Chaos Effect, where the Valiant was trying to reboot or reinvigorate its universe, but that didn't work either. So Mike Barron and Mike Vosberg take over after Barry Windsor Smith. And I don't mind Mike Barron's stuff. He's done some good stuff, but it just falls a little short. It's not as amusing. It's not as entertaining. The relationship isn't as strong or developed or in that vein of being developed. It's just okay. I enjoyed it enough that, because it was an Archer and Armstrong story, and I do like the characters, that I'm willing to read through that. But I really think that the crux of this, the best of it, is the Barry Windsor Smith stuff. And this was just the final issue of that first Valiant run. double-sized issue from the Chaos Effect. Again, an event to try and rekindle interest in the Valiant universe, but unfortunately it didn't work. Now, later on, 2012 was it? Yeah, 2012. Valiant's still around, and they do this. They re-release. Well, not re-release. They reintroduce Archer and Armstrong. The backstory, the origin, they differ from what was written in the original Archer and Armstrong. I haven't read this entire series. It goes from 0 through 25. Fred Van Lent and is the writer for the most part, and Clayton Henry does the artwork. I have heard good things about the rebooted Valiant universe, but I haven't read enough of it to form an opinion on it. But I will be tracking down all of these Archer and Armstrong material, even though, as I did, I read the first couple of them. It's an interesting direction, an interesting way to go. I mean, it's got a lot of similarities with the Archer and Armstrong character from the earlier Valiant days. I just didn't find it quite as entertaining as that Barry Windsor Smith stuff. Maybe it is if I read the entire thing, but for now, I don't know. So ultimately, what's the take? The take is that, yes, I'm going to recommend issues 0 through 12 of this original Archer and Armstrong storyline. As far as collections are concerned, again, if you're just collecting your Valiant universe, if you're collecting Barry Windsor Smith material, there's a couple of guest stars throughout this run from the Valiant universe. Shadow Man, I think, makes an appearance in there. And of course, there's the other two books that are part of the Unity if you want to build the entire Unity line as well. As far as speculation and investment, again, I wouldn't do that kind of thing. I would get an issue number 0, the first appearance of Archer and Armstrong, but it's not going to cost you a great deal of money. It should cost you like $5 to $10. The rest of the material is pretty much going to be in a dollar bin. You may even find this in a dollar bin. So I would seek them out, and I would seek, as I say, the first 13 issues, 0 through 12, just for the reading purposes. But this is the only one that I would consider something to speculate on, because it is the introduction of these characters. I always think that it handled right, in the right hands, this could be a fun show, 6 to 8 issue TV show, streaming show, whatever you want to call it. But I'm not banking on that or anything. I just think it would be fun. So this one I would pick up. And as I say, $5 to $10. Everything else is going to be in a dollar bin. So that's my take on Archer and Armstrong. The first look at the first Valiant title I've looked at. And as I say, 0 through 13, pick them up and enjoy. So until next time, be good to yourself. Be good to one another. Read a couple comic books, and happy hunting.